Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark.
And I'm Randy.
Today we're taking a look at Nanty Narking from Martin Wallace.
Nanty Narking is brought to you by PHALANX Games. It plays 2 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and each game takes about an hour to play.
Great, well, let's go dive in to old Victorian London. Now here's what a typical setup is going to look like. You're going to take the board and put it in the middle of the table, which depicts old Victorian London. Now, in the version we have, we only have the one sided of the board, but there is going to be 2 sides to the board. One's going to have a more atmospheric feel to it, and then the other side is going to be more gritty, more vibrant, so forth, to kind of define the different areas that you can control. Next, everyone's going to pick a color, and each of these colors, there's a set of figures that you're going to be using throughout the game. They consist of buildings and minions or agents. And the neat thing about the agents or minions is that they depict London life. They're actually really neat, intricate, detailed figures.
Now, each player's pieces feature 12 different, let's say, characters that they're going to be using for their agents or minions, and 6 differently shaped, architected buildings.
Yeah, from old Victorian London.
Old Victorian London, that's right.
Then each player receives 5 action cards. These action cards are really the heart of what you're going to be doing on your turn. And you'll receive tokens that equal 10 pounds.
Next, each player will place one of their minions in each of 3 locations. One of them is Chelsea, the other is the East End, and the third is an area called the City, which is London proper. A trouble marker will also be added to each of these 3 areas. Lastly, each player will be given a personality card, which they will keep secret. Now, these personalities might be familiar to you. There are some like Ebenezer Scrooge.
From Dickens?
And, from Dickens, as well as Fagin.
Yep.
And you'll also see some from Arthur Conan Doyle, like Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes.
Indeed.
So the reason it's important you keep these cards secret is each character has their own win conditions for the game. So your agenda, as you're adding pieces to the board, building buildings, and amassing money, is what's driving you towards a win, and it's important you keep that a secret from your opponents.
Indeed. This really adds a lot of variability to the game as you play each time. Now, gameplay is very straightforward. You're going to take one of your action cards and you're going to play it. And these cards will outline what type of actions you're going to take and so forth. And then once you've done that, the second step is to draw another card. And then this keeps going round and round across the table until someone has met their win condition.
The card itself is pretty simple. They're all consistent in the fact that they show the name of the character at the top. And these are characters you're going to cycle through. This is not your personality card, but these are characters that also in many cases are pulled from literary fiction and such.
Indeed.
But the name of the characters across the top, there'll be an image of them here. So for example, this is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, picture of him there. The actions that you will enact during this turn are shown here, and you must enact them from top to bottom. And there's a great reference for what these icons mean. And if there happens to be a scroll, then you will also, during that particular part of this card, you will enact whatever it says down here in the text of the card.
Yep, and that brings up a great point, that this reference card is phenomenal.
It's excellent, it really is.
And, you know, we've seen some really good reference cards as of late, but this is probably one of the best that I've ever seen, because you literally do not need the rulebook. You can play right from this card.
There are some more complicated things that the rulebook explains a bit more, but basically this is what you'll need every time, and everybody has a copy of this. So we'll tell you about why this is valuable. It's not just explaining the actions, but it does a great job of keeping everybody informed.
Now, when you play these cards, all the actions depicted on the cards are optional, with the exception of random events. Random events always get played, and they are city-changing events. They're pretty cool. We'll take a look at those in a minute. But you get to choose these actions. Now, if you skip an action in the sequence, you can't go back to it. So you have to be very methodical about which ones you're going to play and which ones you aren't. And some of the ones that are obviously that you're going to be playing frequently are things like placing an agent or a minion on the board. And it's important to note when you do this, if there's another minion out there, then you must place a trouble marker as well. And these trouble markers are bad because if the other action you're doing is placing buildings, and you can't place a building if a trouble marker exists. So there are ways to deal with that as well, like assassination. If you can assassinate another pawn or another minion on the space, then you get to remove a trouble marker at the same time.
Yeah, so basically if there was contention between two different minions, you've resolved it by killing one of them.
Yes.
You also can remove a trouble marker if that action is shown on your card. So there's a direct way to do that as well. Additionally, there are icons that let you play an additional card. They let you do what's shown on the text on your card, for example. They also let you take money, and money is very key here because the way you build a building is you look at the area where you've got a building, and that you're planning on building a building, and if there's already a building there, you can't build one. So there's a couple things you got to look for: trouble markers and existing buildings. But if there isn't one, and the area is clear, you can spend that amount of money to put a building down.
And some are very expensive to build.
They are, but something we should mention really quickly is that when you do build a building in an area, you get a city area card, which gives you a special power you can invoke on your turn and future turns. So there are reasons to build buildings. Lastly, there is an interrupt symbol on these cards. And those are cards that you don't necessarily play during your turn, but when your opponent plays a card that might impact you with the text written on this card, you can play the interrupt card and prevent him from doing so.
Indeed. All right, let's take a look at these random events because they really are city changing, like we said. So I have Earthquake here, and basically what Earthquake is going to do is it's going to be removing buildings from the board, which is super thematic. And each of the locations in the city has a number associated with it, and you're going to be rolling a 12-sided dice. And in the case of Earthquake, you're going to roll that dice twice, and those locations are going to lose buildings. Now, there's all kinds of things that can happen, right? There's explosions and fires, and there's even a Zeppelin crash, and of course, the London fog.
Yeah, what's London without the fog?
Indeed.
Now, there's a couple of random event cards that deal with additional types of pieces, minions, that we haven't talked about yet. There's a new citizens card and a martial law card. What those do is those bring these new token types onto the board. So your new citizens card, you have got 3 of these little new citizen tokens, and you would roll the die 3 times, and whichever areas are shown on the die, you would put a new citizen in there. Now, as we said, when a new minion comes into an area, if there's already a minion there, you have to put a trouble token down, a trouble marker, and that will block new buildings. So it can prevent your progression of getting those city action cards that you really want, city area cards. The other type is when martial law comes up, you roll the dice 4 times, and in each of the 4 areas shown, you put these grenadier markers down. And these also act as minions. The problem with them, though, is that they bring with them a trouble token, even if there aren't minions already in that area. So again, they block your development of buildings. So these are things you're going to have to work to get rid of if you're wanting to get those special powerful cards.
Indeed. All right, so why are we doing all these things? Why are we placing minions? Why are we putting buildings on the city? Well, it all depends on the type of character you have, which will dictate how you win the game.
Now, for my personality card, it's Professor Moriarty, and what he has to do is get his minions in a certain number of areas before, in order to win the game. The number of areas depends upon the number of players playing, but with 4 players, he's got to get his minions in 9 different areas, and if at the start of his turn he has that, he wins the game. There are other characters, for example, that need to get actual control, meaning the most minions in particular areas, and a certain number of areas would win them the game. Fagin actually will win if there are 8 trouble markers on the board, so you have to be wary about that. That's right. But there are a variety of these things. A great thing about this is that, as I mentioned before, the card keeps you informed. You don't have to play the game 15 times to figure out all the options. They are all listed on player cards. So as players are moving and expanding, you can be saying,
start to telegraph what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right? And of course, there's the exception where if you have Sherlock Holmes, he has a very, very different win condition. His whole goal is to get this action deck cycled through as fast as possible, because once this deck is out, he wins the game.
That's right.
And there's a whole series of variant cards for more advanced play as well.
And that's cool. That's very cool that, like, for example, there's a second version of Professor Moriarty. So as you learn the game, you might want to start playing with those variants. Now, if you run through the entire deck of action cards and nobody has won the game and nobody's playing Sherlock Holmes, there is one last win condition, and that is the player with the most points. The points are determined by the number of minions you have, their values, as well as the buildings you have, and the cash you have on hand.
All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, you know, this game plays really fast, and I really like the old Victorian feel that you get while playing. The characters, or the miniatures, are really well done. They really do depict that that old Victorian London life on the streets.
And as you populate each area, it kind of comes to life as you see people walking their dogs and going to work and so forth. Now, some of you may be having a sense of deja vu. You're saying, haven't I heard or played a game similar to this before?
Indeed.
And don't worry, you're not going crazy here. This game, the game mechanics are actually adapted from a previous Martin Wallace game with a slightly different theme. Now, the settings and the characters are unique, so those have not been adapted. But the previous game that Martin Wallace did has a completely different theme, and it has been out of print for quite a while.
Indeed.
And so many people out there were wanting those mechanics in a game, and this is what PHALANX Games is providing in order to give you the fix you need.
Indeed, indeed. All right, folks, so ultimately, if this game looks like something that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they would appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it from us.
That's it.
And until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at coolstuffinc.com.